If you've ever been the person in the room everyone quietly wrote off, you'll understand what happened at the Cutbank sale barn the morning a broken man bought a broken horse. Nobody in that crowd expected anything from either of them. The horse couldn't stand square. The man couldn't look you in the eye. And when the gavel came down, the whole barn laughed, not cruel laughter exactly, but the kind that says there goes another fool throwing good money after grief. I know because I was standing right there with my little green ledger, and I very nearly laughed too. What none of us understood that morning, what took a full year and one terrible night to teach me, is that some things are only worthless to people who have never had to be worthless themselves. So before you decide who the fool was in this story, let me take you back to that cold spring auction. Stay with me to the end of part 2, because the thing that horse did, the thing I still can't fully explain, is the reason I keep this ledger at all. This is the story of a man named Tom Rourke, a horse nobody wanted, and the miracle that didn't look like a miracle until it was almost too late. The gavel came down at $90, and somebody near the coffee urn laughed out loud. I remember that first before I remember anything else, the laugh, short and surprised, the way you laugh when a dog chases its own tail. Then a second man joined in. Then the auctioneer himself cracked a grin under his mustache and said, "Sold, Lord help you, mister." And the whole barn rolled with it, warm and mean at the same time, the way a crowd will. And in the middle of it all stood Tom Rourke with his hat in his hands, not laughing. I keep a ledger. Little green thing, cloth cover gone soft at the corners, and I've kept one like it for near 30 years working the Cutbank sale barn. In the front I write the legitimate numbers, lot, buyer, price, because that's my job, checking sales against the book so nobody drives off with an animal they haven't squared for. But in the back, upside down so it reads the other way, I write the other things. The things that don't have a column, who cried, who lied, who bought a horse he had no business buying on a cold Tuesday in April. That morning I wrote, Lot 47, T. Rourke, $90, bought the horse the barn laughed at. God knows why. I want to tell you the horse was beautiful and everyone was blind to it. That's how these stories usually go, and it would be a comfort to say it. But the truth is Lot 47 was an ugly animal, and I say that as a man who has loved some ugly animals in his time. He was a bay gelding, or had been bay once, though the coat had gone the dull brown of a dead leaf, patched at the shoulder and flank with the shiny hairless scars of an old burn. One ear was notched near clean off. He carried his head low and cocked to the side because the left eye was milked over blue and blind, and he stood, when he stood at all, with the near hind leg tucked under, never quite putting weight through it, so that even standing still he looked like a fence about to fall. He'd come off a kill pen lot out of Havre. That's the bottom of the world, the kill pen. That's where the horses go that nobody's grandmother wanted, the lame and the old and the mean and the plain unlucky, waiting on the truck to Canada. Somebody at the auction house must have figured they could squeeze one last sale out of him before he shipped, so they ran him through, and the ring men had to lead him because he wouldn't drive, and he came out into the sawdust light shaking all over like a wet cat. The bidding didn't so much start as fail to. The auctioneer opened at 200 and got silence, dropped to 150, silence, 100, and somebody in back said not even for the dog food and got a laugh. The auctioneer, who was a decent man named Bill Prewitt, looked like he wanted the whole thing over with, and I don't blame him. It's an unkind thing, running an animal like that through a ring, and everybody there knew it, and that knowing came out sideways as jokes. Then a hand went up along the rail, just a couple fingers really, lifted off the top pipe of the fence. 90, said Bill, surprised. I got 90, 90, gimme 100, who'll. Nobody would. And that's when the gavel came down and the barn laughed and I wrote my line in the back of the book. You'd have to have known Tom Rourke to understand why it landed the way it did. Everybody at Cutbank knew Tom, and everybody had the same 3 facts about him, worn smooth from handling. Fact 1. He'd had one of the best cow-calf operations on the north side of the river, back when his father ran it, and he was a young man with a strong back and a pretty wife. Fact 2, he'd lost most of it, the wife to cancer, the money to a run of bad cattle years and a bad loan and a worse lawyer, the land down to 160 scrubby acres, and a house that needed a roof it wasn't going to get. And fact 3, the one people lowered their voices for, he'd lost his boy. Danny Rourke, 19 years old, went into the Milk River after a heifer during the spring flood 4 years back when the water was brown and fast and full of fence wire, and the heifer came out and Danny didn't. They found him a mile down 2 days later, and something in Tom went into that river too and never came out. After that, Tom stopped coming to town much. Stopped coming to the sale barn at all except to sell, never to buy, and even his selling had a defeated quality to it, like a man emptying his pockets before a long walk. He'd gone gray all at once. He'd let the ranch go quiet. People said kindly, mostly, that Tom Rourke was a man just running out the clock, and that when he finally sold the last of the land and moved to town nobody would be surprised. So when that man raised 2 fingers to buy that horse, the laugh wasn't really about the horse. It was about the whole shape of the thing, the broke buying the broke, the finished buying the finished, a joke the crowd got to make without having to look too hard at why it wasn't funny. I got down off my stool while they were writing up the next lot, and I went and found Tom at the payment window, counting out the $90 in ones and fives and a lot of coins, and I said the only thing I could think to say, which was, "You want a hand loading him, Tom?" He looked at me, pale eyes red at the rims, a 2-day gray stubble, and he said, "He won't load easy." "No," I agreed, "I don't expect he will." Tom nodded, slow, like I'd said something wise. Then he said a thing I wrote down that night, upside down in the back of the book because I couldn't shake it. He said, "Neither did I once." It took us the better part of an hour to get Lot 47 into Tom's stock trailer. The horse would not go up the ramp, not from stubbornness. I've loaded stubborn horses and they lean back and set their feet and dare you. This wasn't that. This was terror, plain and animal, the whites of the good eye rolling and the breath coming in great shuddering blows through flared nostrils, the whole burned body trembling and lathering up in the cold. Every time we got him near the dark mouth of the trailer, he'd throw himself sideways, favoring that bad hind, nearly going down, and we'd have to start over. Bill Pruitt came out and offered a lunge line and a bucket of grain. A couple of the loading chute men drifted over, and I could feel them wanting to muscle it, to get a rope behind him and just haul him up, because that's how you do it when you're in a hurry and the horse doesn't matter. That's the fast way. It's an ugly way, but it works. Tom wouldn't let them. "No ropes behind him," he said, quiet, not asking, "not on this one." So they drifted off, and it was just the 2 of us and the shaking horse in the gray afternoon, and Tom did the strangest thing. He stopped trying to load him. He just walked away to the far end of the pen and sat down on an upturned bucket with his back half turned and waited. I thought he'd given up. I almost said something. But he hadn't. He was letting the horse look at him, letting it see that the man wasn't coming at it. And it took 20 minutes and the light went flat and cold, and by God that horse, one slow, deliberate limping step at a time, came over and put its nose on the back of Tom Rourke's neck. Tom didn't move, didn't reach up, just let it stand there and breathe on him. Then he got up, easy as anything, and walked to the trailer, and the horse followed him up the ramp with its head down and its blind side to the wall, hobbling, unloved, and Tom shut the gate soft behind it. I have loaded 10,000 horses. I have never seen anything like that before or since. And I want to be honest with you, because this is the kind of story where a man is tempted to sand the edges off and make himself look wiser than he was. At the time, I did not think there is something special here. At the time, I thought, poor old Tom, he's found something even more wrecked than he is, and he's going to break his heart on it, and probably his neck too. I was wrong about the first part. I was almost right about the second. Now I wasn't out at Tom's place every day. I've got my own outfit to run and 40 miles of gravel between us. But Tom's nearest neighbor was a woman named Ruth Havorson, a widow who ran a few sheep and kept an eye on things the way country people do. And Ruth and my sister were close. And so I got the story of that first spring in pieces, over coffee and over the phone, and later straight from Tom himself when he'd talk, which by summer he'd started, a little, to do. Here is what those first weeks were. The horse would not be caught. Tom would go out to the corral with a halter, and the horse would put the fence between them and stand there watching with the one good eye, and Tom would stand there too, and nothing would happen. And after an hour, Tom would go do his chores. He didn't chase. Ruth said she'd see him from the road just standing in that corral in the rain like a fence post, and she thought, same as I did, that the old man had finally cracked. The horse would not be handled. Tom couldn't pick out the feet, couldn't touch the burned side, couldn't so much as brush him for the longest while. That milk-blind left eye meant the horse spooked at anything that came from the wrong direction, and the burned scars meant certain touches sent him crashing off across the pen. And the bad leg, Ruth said Tom had the vet out, old Doc Merrill, and Doc looked at that hind and shook his head. Old injury, badly healed, bone and tendon both. He'll never be sound, Doc said. You'll never ride him. Honestly, Tom, the kind thing. And Tom said, I didn't buy him to ride. Which nobody understood, least of all me. Because what in God's name do you buy a lame, blind, burned, unbroke horse for, if not to fix him into something useful, and if you can't fix him, what's the point? I asked Tom that months later straight out. I said, Tom, what did you buy him for? And he thought about it a long time, turning his coffee cup, and he said, because they were going to put him on the truck, and nobody at that whole sale would even bid $90 to keep him off it. He looked at me. I know what it is to be the thing nobody'll bid on. I didn't have an answer for that, I still don't. I wrote it down. The turn came in June, and it came the way the real ones do, which is small. Tom had taken to sitting in the corral of an evening, not doing anything, just sitting on his bucket with a thermos of coffee, sometimes talking low, sometimes not, letting the horse get used to the shape and smell and sound of him being no threat. And one warm evening in June, with the light going gold and long across the scabland, the horse walked over on its own, the way it had at the sale barn, and lay down. Now you have to understand what that means. A horse only lies down when it feels safe. A prey animal down on the ground is a horse betting its life that nothing's going to eat it. And this horse, this ruined, terrified thing, lay down in the dirt 6 feet from Tom Rourke and put its scarred head flat out in the dust and closed the one good eye and slept. And Ruth, who happened to be dropping off eggs and saw the whole thing from the yard, said Tom sat there and cried. Not loud, not the way you cry at a funeral, just sat there with the tears running down into that gray stubble and his shoulders shaking, and didn't wipe them, because he didn't want to move and wake the horse. He named him that night. Ruth heard him say it soft when the horse finally got up. All right, Danny, all right. He named the horse after his boy. Some folks, when they heard, thought it was morbid. Ruth's own daughter said it wasn't healthy, a man naming a broke-down horse after his drowned son. And maybe, I'm no doctor of the mind, but I think, I've had years to think about it, I think Tom Rourke had a certain amount of love in him that had no place to go, that had been standing in a flooded field for 4 years with nowhere to put itself. And a lame horse nobody wanted was the first thing that would hold still long enough to take it. You put love in a thing, it becomes worth loving. That's not a miracle, that's just how it works. The miracle came later. By late summer, word had gotten around, and the word was Tom Rourke's gone soft in the head over a dead-lot horse. I'll be straight, I helped spread it. Not cruelly, but I tell the story at the sale barn, the $90, the lying down, the name, and men would shake their heads and grin, and it made a good story, and I was, God forgive me, a little bit entertained by it. It's easy to be entertained by another man's grief when it's wearing a strange enough costume. Then in August, I had cause to drive out to Tom's, because Ruth had asked me to bring some panels she was borrowing back to her place, and Tom's was on the way, and I figured I'd see the famous horse for myself. I found Tom in the corral, and I found a different animal than the one I remembered. He was still ugly. Let's not get carried away. Still burned, still blind on the one side, still carrying that hind leg. But the coat had come up, brushed and fed, a real bay now with black points, and he stood squarish. And when Tom moved around the pen, the horse tracked him, turned that good eye and followed, the way a dog follows the one person in the room who matters. Tom could handle him all over now, even the burned side, even the feet. He'd worked out a whole quiet language of it, approaching always from the good side, touching always with a warning hand first, and the horse trusted him the way I have seen few animals trust few men. "He'll come when you call," Tom said, almost shy about it. And he stepped back and said, "Danny," soft, and that lame horse limped across the whole corral and put his nose in Tom's chest. I stood at the fence and felt something I didn't have a word for. I'll try to give it one now. It was shame, I think, mixed up with wonder. Shame for the story I'd been telling at the sale barn. Wonder at what a man could build out of nothing, out of $90 and 4 years of grief, if he was stubborn enough to keep sitting on a bucket in the rain. I said, "Tom, that's really something," which was a poor thing to say, and we both knew it. Tom just scratched the horse's notched ear and said, "He's teaching me more than I'm teaching him." "Yeah, what's he teaching you?" And Tom looked out past the corral, out at the river bottom where the Milk River ran low and brown and quiet in the August heat. 4 years quiet, 4 years since it took his boy, and he said, "That you can be scared of the water your whole life and still let somebody lead you across it, if they go slow, if they don't lie to you about it." I drove home that evening, and I did not tell that story at the sale barn. It wasn't a sale barn story anymore. I wrote it in the back of the book instead, all of it, and at the bottom I wrote a thing I did not fully believe yet but was starting to. Maybe Tom Rourke knew exactly what he was buying. The rains came early that fall, and the river started to rise. The phone rang at Ruth Havorson's a little before 11 at night in the last week of September, and it was Tom Rourke's voice, and it said, "Ruth, the Delgado girl's out in this, down by the river. I'm going after her." Then the line went dead, because the lines went dead all over the North Country that night, and Ruth stood in her kitchen in her nightgown with a dial tone in her hand, and the rain coming sideways against the black window, and she did the only thing she could do, which was call me. I'm going to tell you this part the way I've put it together, from Ruth, from the Delgados, from the sheriff's report, and from Tom, who told me the rest of it himself much later, in pieces. The way he told me everything, because Tom Rourke was not a man who could say a hard thing all at once. It had been raining for 3 days. Not the gentle kind. The kind that comes down like it's got a grudge, that fills the coulees and turns the gravel to soup and puts the whole low country under a skin of moving water. The Milk River, that had run quiet and brown and low all summer, had come up over its banks in the dark, fast and cold and full of debris, and it was doing in September what it had done in April 4 years before. The Delgados had the place downstream from Tom, a young couple, first baby, and their girl. She wasn't a baby. She was 7. A little dark-eyed thing named Marisol, who was horse crazy and had taken, all summer, to walking up the section line to Tom's fence to look at Danny, the ugly horse. Tom would lift her up to sit on the top rail, and she'd feed the horse handfuls of grass and talk to him, and the burned, blind, lame horse that would spook at a blowing sack would stand there gentle as milk for a 7-year-old girl. It was, Ruth said, about the only thing that made Tom laugh anymore. That night Marisol Delgado went out into the storm. Nobody knows exactly why. A dog, maybe. They had a pup that had gotten loose. Her mother said later she'd checked on her at 9, and the bed was full and warm, and at 10:30 it was empty and the back door was unlatched, and the child's little rubber boots were gone from the mat. They ran out into it screaming her name, the father and mother, into a dark so total and a rain so loud that a voice carried maybe 10 feet, And they found the pup. The pup had come back, and they did not find their daughter. And the father drove his truck up the road to Tom's because Tom had a phone that sometimes worked, and Tom knew the river bottom better than any man alive. And Tom Rourke, 61 years old, gray and finished and mocked, put on his slicker and got a rope and a flashlight and went out into the flood to find a little girl in the dark. He took the horse. Now here is the thing that everybody got stuck on afterward, the thing the sheriff couldn't put in his report because it didn't make any sense. Why the horse? Tom had a four-wheeler. Tom had a truck. He had over at the barn a good sound saddle horse named Pete that he'd had for years, a big honest gelding with 2 good eyes and 4 good legs that would go anywhere you pointed him. And Tom left Pete in the barn and took Danny, the lame one, the blind one, the one that couldn't be ridden, that Doc Merrill said would never carry a man, out into the worst night of the year. When I asked him later why, he was a long time answering, and what he finally said was this: Pete wouldn't go near the water. I tried him first. Good horse, Pete. Sensible horse. He took one look at that river in the dark and he wanted no part of it, and I don't blame him because that's the sensible thing. But Danny, and here Tom stopped, and I watched him try to find it. Danny's already been through the fire. He's already been the thing everybody gave up on. And there's a kind of animal, I think, that once it's been to the bottom and come back, it isn't scared of the same things anymore. It's scared of different things. And drowning wasn't one of Danny's. I have turned that over 10,000 times. I don't know if it's true about horses. I suspect it's truer about men. But I know what happened, so I'll tell you what happened. Tom couldn't ride him. The bad leg wouldn't carry a man's weight for long. So Tom didn't ride him. Tom walked in the flooded dark up to his knees and then his thighs in moving water, with the flashlight in one hand and the lead rope in the other, and the ugly horse walking beside him. On the good eye side, always the good eye side, Tom and the horse's good eye where he could be seen and trusted. And the horse, Tom said, wanted to go one way. Tom wanted to go along the bank, calling, sweeping the light, the sensible search pattern, the way you'd look for anything. But the horse kept pulling gently, insistently, down toward the water, out toward the black roar of the main channel where no sane man would take a step. And Tom, who by then had learned to trust that animal with a completeness he had trusted almost nothing in his life, stopped fighting it and followed. He said he didn't know what the horse smelled or heard. He said maybe it was nothing, maybe it was a fool's errand, maybe he was following a dumb beast to both their deaths. But he'd spent a whole summer learning that this horse knew things, where the good grass was under the snow that wasn't there yet, where the coyotes were before you heard them, when Tom's own heart was low some evenings before Tom himself knew it. So he followed. The horse led him out onto a gravel bar that the flood hadn't quite covered, a spine of higher ground running out into the channel that you'd never have known was there in the dark, and out at the end of it, where the water was tearing past on both sides and rising, was a cottonwood snag, an old drowned tree caught crossways in the current, throwing up a great white beard of foam. And caught in the branches of it, up out of the water by maybe a foot, blue-lipped and silent and past screaming, in a soaked nightgown with one rubber boot gone, was Marisol Delgado. She'd been swept, they figured later, gone down to the water after the pup, gotten too close to the Cutbank in the dark, and the bank had given way the way flooded banks do, and the river had taken her, same river, same flood, same cold brown water that took Danny Rourke 4 years before, and by some grace or accident had jammed her into that snag instead of carrying her down to where they'd have found her in 2 days a mile downstream. She was alive, barely, cold-shocked, half-drowned, too weak and too far gone to hold on much longer. And she was 30 feet out into a channel that would sweep a grown man off his feet and kill him. Tom Rourke stood on that gravel bar and he could not reach her. He tried the rope, no way to throw it that would do any good, nothing to anchor it to, a 7-year-old too far gone to catch it and hold. He tried to wade, and the water took him off his feet the second he left the bar and he barely clawed back. He was an old man, alone in the dark, in a flood 30 feet from a dying child, and there was, by every sensible measure, nothing he could do but watch her go the way his boy went. And this is the part I can't fully explain to you, and I've stopped trying, and I just tell it plain. The horse went into the water. Not driven, not led. Tom said he never asked it and would never have asked it, would never have sent an animal to die. The horse, the lame one, the blind one, the one that couldn't carry a man, that had trembled and lathered at the mouth of a trailer, that had lain in the dirt of a corral and let a broken man cry over it. That horse walked off the gravel bar into the killing current on 3 good legs and 1 bad one, and put its blind side to the tearing water so the good eye stayed on the child. And it fought its way out to that snag through water that would have drowned Pete and Tom, and any sensible creature God ever made. Tom said it swam and stumbled and went under once and came up, and got its feet somehow on the gravel of the drowned channel, and got itself broadside against the current below the snag, a wall, a windbreak, a still place in the roaring water, and stood there, shaking, bleeding from where the branches tore it, standing. And it looked back at Tom with the one good eye. And Tom, who understood that animal better than he'd ever understood any living thing, understood what it was telling him. I made the water still. Now come. So Tom went. Along the horse's body, hand over hand down the length of that ugly scarred back, in the lee of it, in the one place in that whole river a man could stand. Tom Rourke waded out and reached up into the branches of that cottonwood snag and took Marisol Delgado down out of the tree, dead weight and ice cold and not moving, and he got her against his chest, and he got a fist in the horse's mane, and the 3 of them, the old man, the child, and the horse nobody wanted, came back out of the Milk River together. The child lived. I want to say that clean and early so you're not holding your breath. Marisol Delgado lived. She was in the hospital in Havre 4 days with pneumonia and cold shock, and her mother did not leave the room, and on the 5th day she woke up and asked for the horse. She's a grown woman now, married, lives in Great Falls. She named her own daughter's pony Danny. She'll tell you the story if you ask her, and she cries every time, and she was 7 and doesn't remember most of it, but she remembers this. Cold, and then a great dark warm wall coming through the water, and an old man's arms. The horse lived too, though it was a near thing. It tore itself up bad on the snag and took a chill and foundered a little in the weeks after, and Doc Merrill, the same doc who'd said the kind thing would be to put him down, drove out and doctored it for 2 weeks straight and wouldn't take a dime. And when he was done, he stood in Tom's corral and looked at that ugly, blind, lame, scarred, half-drowned horse for a long time, and he took off his hat. I was there for that. I'd started coming out to Tom's a good deal by then. Doc took off his hat to a $90 kill pen horse, and he said, "Tom, I've been wrong about a lot of things in 40 years of this. I don't know as I've ever been wrong about a bigger one." And Tom said, "And this is the thing, this is the whole thing, this is why I keep the ledger," Tom said. "You weren't wrong about what he was, Doc. You were just wrong about what that's worth." The county gave Tom a plaque. There was a piece in the paper, "Local man and his horse save drowning girl," with a photo of Tom looking uncomfortable and the horse looking ugly. And for a little while Tom Rourke was famous in the small way a man gets famous around here, which is that people at the sale barn who used to laugh now got quiet and respectful when he came in, which I think Tom found even harder to stand than the laughing. But that's not the ending. The plaque isn't the miracle. I want to be careful here because the temptation is to tie it up in a bow, and so the horse everyone mocked became a hero, the end, and that's not true to it, and Tom would hate it, and I owe him better. Here's the ending, or the closest I can get to one. 2 years after the flood, the horse died. He was old, and he'd been through the fire and the water both, and one winter morning Tom went out to the barn and Danny was down and couldn't get up, and Doc came, and there wasn't anything to do but the last thing. Tom sat in the straw with the horse's head in his lap the whole while, and after, he didn't come to town for a month. When he finally did, I bought him coffee at the cafe, and I didn't know what to say, so I said the true thing, which was, "I'm sorry, Tom. He was a good horse." And Tom turned his cup around and around, the way he did, and he said something I've never forgotten, that I wrote in the back of the green book the same night. That is the last thing in the entry, and maybe the truest thing anybody ever said to me across a cafe table. "You know what everybody got wrong all along, right from the sale barn." He looked up at me. "They thought I saved that horse. $90 kept him off the truck, nursed him up. Everybody thinks I saved him." He shook his head slow. "I didn't save him. He was the thing that got sent to save me. I just didn't know it yet that day at the barn. I just knew he was the only creature in that whole building worse off than I was, and I couldn't stand to watch one more thing get given up on." He was quiet a while. "Turned out," he said, "that's the same thing. Sometimes the only way back is you go and you refuse to give up on the one thing everybody else already has. And then one night when the water comes—" He didn't finish it. He just looked out the cafe window at the gray street, an old man who'd lost a wife and a son and a ranch and now a horse, and who was, against everything, all right. Better than all right. Whole in a way he hadn't been in years. I never heard him finish that sentence. I don't think he needed to. I don't think.